take that. Thank you. All righty. Well, we'll come on back. I don't know about you, but I associate Easter egg hunts with cold. I don't know why, but like just Minnesota and like spring weirdness, childhood memories were just freezing trying to find eggs. So hopefully that's not your experience. It's kind of a downer in terms of Easter eggs hunts, but that's mine. I just wanted to mention, I was just in the back here, just kind of sitting back and reflecting and listening and watching to the hum of our meal and conversation, the giggles of the kids, the laughter and people leaning into conversation, and I was just like, dang, I like this. I'm grateful for this. And I think Jesus is smiling when we come together and gather in this way. And I know that what we have, what we get to do together, comes from some blood, sweat, and tears, some courage, some hard times, and some good times. But it's good. And I think Jesus likes what we do. Maybe I'm selfish and biased, but it's good. And I just want to encourage you in this season as we kind of awaken our hospitality eyes and ears a little bit more as we think towards the summer and as Easter's coming up. I think that there's more people who you might know who would experience this as good as well. And I want you to know that they're welcome at this table. And I want you to know that you have permission to invite. No one has the keys to inviting. There's not a secret inviting team that gets to invite people. You're it. You're on the team. And I just want to encourage you to share this if it's meaningful to you with others who it might be meaningful for. So we're sort of moving towards the end of this interesting thing that we've been doing over the Lenten season, over the Easter season, and we're concluding this time in the church calendar with Holy Week. So that's just a reference to, like, if you've read the Gospels before, there is a lot packed in that last few days before Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. And the church throughout history has tried to lean in to this week and try to notice the significance of it. We've done that in a lot of different ways throughout our community. This year, I just want to offer two things to you. First of all, obviously celebrating Easter with us next week will be a meaningful time for us. We try to make it a celebration and refocus on what the resurrection means for our everyday life. But I also want to provide these two things. First and foremost is this resource that was developed by a bunch of Kiwis, and I don't mean the fruit. I mean people from New Zealand during the pandemic time when we couldn't gather together, created a resource that you could do with your family, yourself, or a few close friends. And it's kind of a DIY Holy Week experience that starts on Good Friday and goes all the way through Sunday morning. So I wanted to empower you with this if you are looking for a way to make more meaning of this week through some activities. This is packed with them. So all you got to do is text, I know it's kind of morbid, text Graves to this number. The number's in front of you as well. And our, I almost said our admin team, which is Alana, will text you this, maybe not right away, but sometime today or early this week, so you can read through that, prepare, and maybe do something meaningful with your family or some friends. Maybe something you can do with the microchurch if you're connected. Not obligatory, just an option for you. And then Mill City has kindly invited us, our Mama Church, to come and participate at their Good Friday services, which will be a meaningful worship opportunity on Friday, if that's helpful to you. Back to us, we've been doing these Lectio Divinas as kind of the anchor of our discussion time. We orient this time in our church gathering around the table to stir up discussion. The fancy word is this is dialogical. So it's not just me talking up here. I talk for a reason to provoke thoughts and ideas that hopefully you can digest and express around the table with your friends that you're sitting around. And we're taking a little bit different tact, and we're trying to engage physically or visually in Scripture, in the story of Jesus' death and all that Holy Week means. And you can see around the room, we've been on a journey, and we're almost towards the end. And this is the image we have today. So what I want to invite you to do is I'm actually going to read a version of, kind of an adapted version of, the author's meditation that goes with this image today. This image, I want to give you a little context on the scripture that it's based off of. It's based off the story of Jesus. It's in the shape of a cross. But there's a particular story it nods to, and that is this story when Jesus is eating with a Pharisee or some friends, and this woman comes, a woman of questionable character comes and pours a bunch of perfume on Jesus and anoints him. And the disciples have some interesting reactions, one of which is, she just spilled a lot of money on the ground. We could have given that to the poor. And a lot of reactions about her and whether she was fit to do that. But Jesus' reaction was, the world is going to remember this woman and tell her story for the end of time. And then he says, she did this in anticipation of my burial. So I just want to give you that context and go ahead and focus in on this text or this picture and imagine that text or that story taking place. And then just focus in, and I invite you to ask, what's standing out to you? What questions does this bring up for you? What do you think God might be saying to you or to us in this? And after this is done, we'll have a little pause, and then I'll invite you to turn to 2 or 3 people around you and discuss that. Reading. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Matthew 26:12. Questions. What was the last funeral you went to? How do you remember the ones you have lost? What do you think the purpose of a funeral is? Meditation. This station is a cross-section of 2 elements typically involved in our burial ritual: flowers, or a flower and a shovel. You may have experienced the ritual of throwing flowers onto a grave at a funeral. No one actually knows where this tradition started. Various explanations have been given for why it's practiced. One opinion is that flowers help us say what is difficult to say in words. They are symbols of our gratitude, honor, grief, and well wishes to those who had such an effect on our lives. Throwing a flower into a grave is our final tribute to the gift to us that was their incarnation. Another explanation is that flowers signify the beginning of life. Placing flowers in the grave expresses a hope that the death of a loved one is the beginning of a new life. The shovel is a representation of how we excavate a hole in the earth and place our deceased loved ones in it. It reminds us of the prayer we say when we receive ashes on our forehead at the beginning of Lent. From dust you came, and dust you shall return. The poem at the beginning of Genesis speaks of a creator making a human form out of dirt, which is just the elements of the universe, and animating that form with its own breath, with God's own breath. So it makes sense that when we witness the spirit of that form depart, we naturally return the dirt portion of the form back to earth. The flower and shovel remind us that we are an amalgamation of soul and dirt, spirit and material, something tangible and intangible. We remember that there is a part of us that returns to dirt. And there is another part of us, if we hope in Jesus, that goes to be with him, though there is much mystery about what that looks like. The shovel and the flower remind us that we are in between. Death still stings us every day, yet the cross bears a hope of something new, something different, and something that has disrupted the dominance of death. Jesus partook in dying. Jesus partook in being buried. Let's just pause for 30 seconds and gather our thoughts here. All right, I want to invite you to turn to someone next to you, 2 to 3 people. Just share, maybe focus on one of these questions about what stood out to you, what questions came up for you, or what do you think God might have been saying to you or to us. Okay? We'll be back in a few minutes. All right. I know we got more to discuss, and we'll have space to do it in a few minutes here, but I'd love to, if something really resonated with what someone else said or was really resonating with you, would you mind just offering that up to the whole room if you feel comfortable doing that? Anything standing out to you, questions, something God might be saying?
We talked about the flower choice and the image, how we don't remember a lot of text really about roses specifically, but we know of a lot of things relating in regarding to thorns in Scripture.
Yeah, cool. JJ, what does the bird?
It does look like a bird.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I saw it first as a leaf, but at a glance, it does look a little bit like a bird. That's the beauty about art, is it's open for you to see different things than maybe even what the author intended. Any other thoughts you want to share? Well, I just want to offer a few more thoughts that maybe continue our discussion and thought about what this means for us. I love the phrase that Isaac used a few weeks ago, that we kind of contemplate these images to be restoried. We're always desiring to situate our lives in a story that empowers us. And this one, I can't think of a more empowering story than the story of the cross and resurrection. So I was about 13. This was in 2001. I was a big paintballer when I was 13. Anybody else played paintball before? It was, yeah, all right. Once. Once was enough. But for whatever reason, I was like a year and a half moving to a new city or a new town, and was hanging with some buddies, my besties in high school, Johnny and Luke. We were at Johnny's house constructing a paintball course out of whatever we could find that we could either steal or his dad didn't want or wouldn't notice was gone. So we were halfway through constructing a bunker or something, and I saw Johnny's mom's car kind of bombing down the dirt road towards us. I was like, oh no, we used something we weren't supposed to, or we stole something we weren't supposed to for this. But as soon as she got out of the car, I noticed it was something probably different than that. And I don't know if you've been in these moments where you start reading on the person's face that your life might be about to change. I don't know that my 13-year-old brain was there yet, but it was confused and curious. And bless Lynn, bless her heart. She is a trained social worker and cut right to the chase. And in her loving countenance, looked at me and said, "I'm very sorry, JD, but your grandfather has died." And I vividly remember losing the ability of my legs and dropping to the ground and just being crushed. Like my world had shattered a little bit. I had a dear relationship with my grandfather, and immediately my boys, Luke and Johnny, embraced me. And I don't really remember. They either carried me or helped me into the car, and we drove straight home. I got onto the lawn of my house, and my mom and my family came running out, and we embraced and wept. And, wow, I'm even tearing up now. It's many, many years later. But that was the first experience, the first real experience that shattered my view that life would just keep going on, that life would just persist the way that I was used to it. It was my first hard encounter with the sting of death in my life. And that opened up a vista of understanding the world around me through the loss of my grandfather, not only that mortality comes for all of us, that we're on this kind of journey of decay in this world that we live in now, but all of the permutations that death has in our life. It opened my eyes to all of the ways that death is a nemesis in our world, beyond just people dying in whatever form, how it affects me and how it branches into my world. And now, with those new eyes, I noticed ways in which I had given myself to certain things and become captive to them, and they decayed my spiritual vitality. They decayed my emotional vitality. It was in that moment that I realized that death was much more, and still painful as it is to lose someone, death is the essential evil in our world. When we think about the things that are not right around us, that is at the core. Not only the mortality, but how it stretches into the powers and principalities is the scripture, or the way that Scripture talks about, that oppress and dehumanize our neighbors and us, how they pit other people against each other and violence comes into the world. When I have a racist thought that separates me from someone else, when I see a woman and that woman becomes an object to look at, when I lash out at a child and harshly because of something going on in me, not something going on in them, all of that is a permutation of death's grip on my life. When the spiritual forces lurk in the back of my mind, in the back of human systems and ideologies and enslave us and pit us against each other, the Bible would say that too is the reach of death. So here I am, a 13-year-old, coming face to face with the hard reality that we live in the midst of. This is where this dust to dust phrase comes from. I think of Genesis, as was quoted. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, for dust you are, and dust you will return. When that happened to me and I lost my Opa, as I affectionately called him, I grew up a little bit and became more familiar with the hardships that we experience. One of life's most fierce questions, and one that all of us need to grapple with, is death it? Is it our fate? Is it headed for all of us, and is that the end of the story? And maybe right now, maybe you feel a weight of a particular loss that you're experiencing, the guilt or shame of a mistake or regret, feeling enslaved to something or someone in your life. Maybe you've been slapped in the face by a system that doesn't value you. Maybe you have this inherent frustration with the reality and all of its permutations, reality of death and all of its permutations. Then Paul, in Romans 8, has an expression that might fit your life. It says, for creation was subject to frustration. Do you feel that frustration? We feel frustrated in hope that creation itself will be liberated from the bondage of decay, of death. Life lived on earth now is a life lived in bondage to death. Human existence has been a story of living in captivity to death. And it begs the cosmic and personal question, what is the God who created this world going to do about this? The Easter that we celebrate next week is God's answer to this question that was aching in my heart as a 13-year-old and aches in my heart every time I hear of a loss in our community, whether it be our neighborhood or our church community. An ache for life. An ache for death to be dissolved. So what is God's response? This is what we look to. This is what we've been observing this whole journey. Jesus coming, God himself incarnating in human flesh, living a life, growing up, going through puberty, having hard work, sweating blood, sweat, and tears, living among us, being close to the suffering that death inflicts in all its permutations, and then ultimately dying. Dying from a mob who decides to kill him, to put him up on a tree. An oppressive system that executes him. Our God entered into death. God, who created this world, doesn't just stand back and say, too bad, suck it up, guys, life is hard. Jesus, and what we celebrate this week, is that he faces it head on. And then there's Easter. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm supposed to save this for next week, but bear with me. I couldn't help. In my mind, you can't talk about Jesus' death without talking about his resurrection. They come as one. So what does Easter mean? Jesus' tomb is not a grave, it's a garden. Jesus foreshadows this when he talks about this parable where he says a seed needs to go in the ground in order for it to sprout new life. This means that Jesus' cross isn't just about the shovel, it's about the flower too. Easter screams that because of Jesus' death, death is not the end of our story. N.T. Wright, an author and a thinker that has really helped me shape my thinking about the difference that Jesus' death makes in my life, puts it this way. The crucifixion of Jesus was a one-off event. The one moment in history on behalf of all others through which sin would be forgiven, death defeated by death, the powers robbed of their power, and humans redeemed to take their place as worshipers and stewards. Jesus defeats death through death. You know, I don't have time to get into all of this, but I put together this little graph to think about all of the aspects of death. You can take a picture if you want to ponder on this. We're going to come back to it next week, but this is my Enneagram 5 brain. And all the ways that death has affected me throughout my life, both the ways that I have idolized things in the world and given myself to them, and they've only broken down my humanity, the powers and principalities that exist in the systems that oppress people in this world, the exile or separation I feel from others and God, being enslaved to something, the corruption, the moral corruption that I've sometimes partaken in or experienced in the world, and the shame that comes from all of that. Those are all the permutations of death. And Jesus' death itself and the resurrection story turn that on its head. By an obedient life of sacrificial death, we're saved from sin and idolatry by Jesus. Through nonviolence and self-giving love, we affront the powers and principalities that perpetuate death in our world. Through the leadership of Jesus, we bearing separation and restoring access. Jesus gives us a space of belonging and union with God. It's a new exodus in the cross that gives us freedom and adoption in who Jesus is. Hope and bodily resurrection when we lose those dearest to us. So now when I go back to Tennessee and I look out the kitchen window of our family property and I see where my Opa is buried, my hope is not that. My hope is that he is caught up in Jesus' story and one day will experience the newness of life. The questions I want us to sit with this week as we enter into Holy Week is, how have we felt the sting of death? Maybe you're grieving something coming into this Holy Week. I know our community is grieving certain losses. How have you felt the sting of death? Are the things that we are captive to that cause us decay? Are there things that have hold of our lives, spiritually, physically, otherwise? Do we have apathy towards other or participate in other systems that perpetuate the curse of death? And the ultimate question I want to sit with this week, and even as we contemplate this image, is what does Easter have to say to that for us, for our neighbors, and for our world? Unless a kernel of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. That's the hope that we have this week. I would love for us to invite us into a time of just turning to one person next to you, pairing up, and for 2-3 minutes here, share some of your responses or thoughts to all we've been processing and talking about. And we'll continue in worship and somberly enter into a week where we anticipate the joy of resurrection. So turn to one person, share some thoughts that you might have that are coming up for you. What questions you have, what God might be saying, start that conversation.